The sea has always been a graveyard of secrets, but among sailors, there exists a tale that stirs even the bravest hearts into silence. They whisper of an artifact not forged by time nor swallowed by accident, but sealed away beneath the crushing dark, a relic they call the Oracle's Mirror. Unlike any mirror you and I would know, this was no tool for vanity. It was said to reflect not the face of the present, but the shadow of the future, a cruel oracle of what was yet to come. The legend begins not with discovery, but with ruin. Centuries ago, long before European ships carved their maps into the Atlantic and Pacific, a civilization thrived along an island chain now lost beneath the waves. They worshipped the sea, believing it was not just water and salt but a living entity, with eyes and thoughts of its own. In their greatest temple stood the mirror, a bronze disk taller than 2 men, polished so finely it shimmered like still water. Priests claimed it had been gifted to them by the ocean itself, drawn up from the abyss where light never touches. Those who gazed into it saw not their reflection, but what tomorrow might hold. Some saw harvests overflowing with fish, and indeed the seas swelled with abundance the following season. Others saw death in storms, and ships were splintered by hurricanes no man could have foreseen. The mirror became the heart of the civilization, guiding every choice, when to fish, when to sail, when to go to war. But the sea is never kind for long. As the years passed, the visions turned darker. Fishermen saw their own drowning bodies before casting their nets. Warriors saw themselves impaled before lifting their spears. The priests claimed these were warnings meant to be heeded, but people grew desperate. They tried to outrun what they saw. They hid, they fled, they killed each other to prove the visions wrong, and in doing so, every future they feared came true. In time, the island was consumed, not by fire, not by plague, but by paranoia. Entire families refused to leave their homes, starving inside, terrified of the mirror's curse. When storms came, no one dared to sail, and famine hollowed them out. The temple collapsed under the weight of the waves, dragging the mirror down into the abyss. Some say it was the ocean reclaiming what it had given. Others whisper the people themselves hurled it into the sea, hoping to bury the curse forever. Centuries turned to millennia, and the legend of the Oracle's Mirror became little more than a mariner's story, traded like cheap rum in smoke-filled taverns. Sailors spoke of it not as a treasure, but as a warning. "The mirror doesn't just show the future," one old sea dog muttered into his cup. "It makes you live it, and it's never kind." Marcus Reed had heard that tale before. At first, he dismissed it as folklore, just another ghost story sailors clung to on long voyages. But Marcus wasn't a man easily frightened. He was an adventurer, a salvager of lost things, and his career had been built not on caution, but on obsession. Gold pulled from shipwrecks, silver torn from forgotten holds. He had seen it all. Yet money was no longer enough. What drew him to the mirror wasn't just greed. Marcus had been haunted by something else, something he'd never told his crew. Years earlier, in a storm that nearly sank his salvage vessel, he'd watched his brother drown before his eyes. The helplessness of that moment had clung to him ever since, a silent torment. If the mirror truly showed the future, Marcus believed it might give him something no amount of treasure could, the power to never feel powerless again. He wasn't alone in chasing shadows. His crew had followed him into madness before, and they would again. Evelyn, sharp-eyed and sharper-witted, had once been an archaeologist before academia spat her out for chasing fairy tales. Ryan, the youngest diver, carried more courage than wisdom, desperate to prove himself in waters that killed men twice his age. And then there were the others, salvagers, mercenaries, drifters, each drawn by the same thing, the promise of a relic worth fortunes. But it was not fortune Marcus promised them when he told the tale of the mirror. It was certainty. "Imagine," he said one night aboard their ship, his voice low but fervent. "No more guesses. No more blind chances. With the mirror, we'll see what's coming before it happens. We'll always be one step ahead. Evelyn frowned, sipping her whiskey. Or we'll see things we're not meant to see. Futures we can't change. That kind of knowledge, it eats people alive. Marcus only smiled, though it never reached his eyes. Then we'll make sure it eats someone else first. Not long after, a fragment of proof surfaced. In an auction house in Lisbon, Marcus obtained a waterlogged journal, its leather cover chewed by salt and time. Inside were scattered entries of a 17th-century sailor, part of a crew that claimed to have glimpsed the mirror in a sunken ruin off the mid-Atlantic ridge. The final entry, scrawled in desperation, read, "The mirror showed us tomorrow. We tried to change it. We failed. God help us, the sea was waiting." There were no further pages, no record of the ship's return. To Marcus, that was not a warning, it was a map. And so, under the veil of secrecy, he charted a course to the coordinates hinted in the journal. A stretch of ocean, where sonar scans revealed unnatural shapes deep below, structures too ordered, too precise to be natural. An underwater city, perhaps, or a grave. As the ship cut across black waters, the crew grew restless. The sea was calm, but the air seemed heavy, charged. At night, Marcus caught Ryan staring at his own reflection in the cabin's porthole, as though expecting to see something other than himself staring back. Evelyn kept sharpening her dive knife without reason, muttering, "Reflections lie." The closer they came to the abyss, the more the legend grew teeth. Fishermen at the last port had spat on the deck when Marcus mentioned the mirror, one even making the sign of the cross. "Don't bring it up. Don't bring it out," the old man had warned. "The sea doesn't give back what it takes." But Marcus Reed wasn't a man who heeded warnings. He believed the mirror was waiting for him, buried in silence, ready to grant him the one thing he craved above all else: control. The waves beneath his ship hid the abyss, and in that abyss, the mirror waited. Whether it would show salvation or damnation, Marcus would soon find out. The Atlantic rolled black and featureless under a moonless sky. Marcus Reed stood at the helm of his salvage vessel, the Acheron, watching the horizon vanish into nothing. Beneath them, miles of water pressed down over an abyss no map dared name. The journal's coordinates had led them here to a section of the mid-Atlantic ridge where sonar scans revealed jagged ridges, collapsed caverns, and faint traces of man-made geometry. The crew called it the Scar, and it felt every bit as cursed as the stories claimed. Preparations had been underway for hours. Floodlights bolted to the submersibles flickered in the humid night air. Divers checked oxygen tanks, sealing helmets with practiced movements. Evelyn crouched beside a crate of sonar beacons, her brow furrowed as she adjusted dials that refused to stabilize. Every calibration slid off-kilter, as if the ocean itself were bending the signals. "This ridge scrambles everything," she muttered, wiping condensation from her glasses. "Sonar, compass, even the GPS. It's like the sea doesn't want to be mapped." Ryan, hauling a coil of safety line, grinned nervously. "Or maybe it's haunted." No one laughed. The silence on deck was thick, punctuated only by the groan of waves against steel. Marcus stepped forward, his voice firm. "We launch at dawn. First descent, 3 divers plus me. We'll plant beacons, chart the entry point, and verify the structures below. The mirror's down there, waiting. We take it before anyone else can." Evelyn glanced up sharply. "You sound like it's calling you." Marcus didn't answer. He didn't have to. In his chest, the pull of obsession felt like a tide that never receded. The descent began at first light. The Acheron lowered a submersible into the sea, its floodlights cutting cones through water the color of slate. Marcus, Evelyn, and Ryan climbed inside with one more diver, Hayes, a grizzled veteran whose scarred face betrayed no fear. The hatch sealed, and with a hiss of compressed air they sank into the abyss. At 200 meters, the surface light was gone. By 400, even the faintest glow had vanished, replaced by a blackness so complete it seemed alive. The only illumination came from their lamps, shimmering against endless curtains of drifting plankton. Outside, something large stirred, a shadow slipping just beyond reach. "Probably a whale," Ryan said too quickly. Hayes shook his head. "Whales don't swim this deep." At 700 meters, the pressure was a living thing, groaning against the hull. Instruments flickered. The digital compass spun in slow, meaningless circles. Evelyn cursed under her breath. "Marcus, if we lose nav control this early, we're blind." Marcus leaned forward, eyes fixed on the screen. "Not blind. Guided. Keep going." Then the sonar chimed. For a heartbeat, the display showed a human silhouette standing in the water just ahead. No one breathed. A second later, the signal blinked out, leaving only static. Ryan swallowed hard. "Tell me that was an error." Evelyn's voice trembled despite her defiance. It was an error, but none of them believed it. At 900 meters, they reached the ridge. Towers of basalt rose like cathedral spires, sharp and jagged, some carved into angles too precise to be natural. It was as if the ruins of a city had been folded into the seafloor, swallowed whole by the ocean's hunger. Their lamps skimmed across collapsed arches and broken staircases leading nowhere. "This isn't geology," Evelyn whispered. "It's architecture." Marcus smiled. "Proof." They guided the submersible between pillars until a cavern yawned ahead, vast and black, the size of a hangar. Sonar showed no bottom. Hayes deployed a tethered beacon, its red light sinking into the void. The tether line rattled, pulling taut. Then it snapped. The beacon vanished into the dark. "Pressure didn't snap that," Hayes muttered. "Something down there pulled it." Ryan's breath fogged his visor. "We shouldn't be here." But Marcus leaned closer to the viewport, eyes wide with hunger. "This is it. The entrance. The Temple of the Mirror." They descended into the cavern. Walls of stone loomed on all sides, etched with faint carvings barely visible under floodlights. Faces twisted in agony, hands raised in prayer, all distorted as though melted by time, their hollow eyes fixed on the divers. Evelyn pressed a gloved hand against the glass. Their reflections, distorted, like someone staring into a mirror too long. As they glided deeper, something shimmered against the stone, a surface that gleamed with unnatural light, a fragment of bronze, circular and impossibly polished, embedded in rubble. For an instant, Marcus swore it flickered, not with his reflection, but with a version of himself, older, grayer, staring back with hollow eyes. He blinked. The image was gone. "Did you see that?" he whispered. "See what?" Ryan asked, panic rising in his voice. Marcus shook his head. "Nothing. Keep moving." At the cavern's heart stood a gate of stone, half buried in silt. Beyond it, their lights caught a faint metallic sheen. Hayes cursed softly. "That's not a wall. That's a mirror." Evelyn's hands trembled on the controls. "Marcus, don't. If the legends are true—" "Then we're standing at the edge of history," Marcus cut in, his voice sharp. "This is what we came for, the Oracle's mirror." Outside the viewport, the surface stirred again. For a moment, each of them thought they saw their own face staring back, not as they were now, but as they might be. Ryan saw himself older, scarred, clutching his throat as water poured from his mouth. Evelyn saw herself crowned in gold, but her eyes were hollow. Marcus saw himself triumphant, holding the mirror aloft as men bowed before him. The visions vanished as quickly as they came, leaving only silence. But the silence was worse than any scream. Marcus leaned forward, his breath fogging the glass. "We found it," and though none of them dared to speak, every soul in that submersible knew the same truth. The mirror had found them first. The submersible drifted deeper into the cavern, its lights catching swirls of silt and ancient carvings that twisted across the walls like veins of memory. The sea pressed in heavier with every meter, the silence so dense it seemed to squeeze the breath from their lungs. Marcus pressed his palm against the glass, eyes locked on the faint metallic shimmer ahead. The mirror stood waiting beyond a collapsed stone arch, framed by broken columns carved with figures kneeling, their faces warped in despair. Evelyn's voice cracked through the intercom, thin with disbelief. "It's real. After centuries of whispers, it's here." Ryan gripped his harness until his knuckles whitened. "Then maybe we should leave it here," Hayes muttered, his voice gravel deep. "Wise words. Not all treasure is meant to be touched." Marcus ignored them. Obsession burned in him brighter than fear. He ordered Hayes to maneuver the submersible closer. The beams swept over the relic, revealing its full form at last. A disk of ancient bronze taller than a man, its surface so polished it reflected light in impossible clarity, untouched by time or tide. Around its rim, inscriptions spiraled inward, symbols that seemed to writhe under the gaze as though they did not want to be read. And in the center, the reflection appeared. Not of the divers, but of something else. A temple corridor stretched endlessly, torches flickering though no fire should burn underwater. Marcus felt the air catch in his chest. It wasn't a reflection. It was a window. Evelyn whispered, "Do you see that? It's not us. It's another place." Ryan shook his head violently. No, it's a trick. Light, pressure, our minds are breaking." But Hayes, silent until now, leaned closer, his scarred face pale. "That's the future," he murmured. "Or what it wants us to believe is the future." As they watched, the mirror rippled like disturbed water. Marcus saw his own face on the other side, standing in that torchlit corridor holding the mirror in his hands while crowds chanted his name. He felt the weight of destiny on his shoulders, a crown without thorns, a promise fulfilled. Evelyn gasped suddenly, pressing her visor to the glass. "It's showing me, surrounded by books, scrolls, discoveries beyond measure. I've solved the riddles no one else could. I've unlocked everything." Her voice shook with wonder. Ryan let out a strangled cry. "I see myself drowning, alone, my lungs burning. Why would it show me that?" Hayes's jaw tightened. "Because the mirror doesn't lie. It shows what comes." Marcus's eyes never left the vision of his triumph. "Or it shows what we can make come true." The submersible creaked as though the ocean itself disapproved. Lights flickered. For a heartbeat, their reflections on the mirror shifted again. Not triumph, not terror, but corpses floating in black water, their eyes empty, their mouths open in silent screams. Then the vision snapped back, and the torchlit corridor burned bright once more. Evelyn's breath quickened. "Marcus, we have to leave. This isn't just a relic. It's a curse. Every legend warned us." Marcus turned sharply, his voice hard. "Legends are written by those too afraid to claim what's theirs. This is knowledge, power, prophecy, ours for the taking." He ordered Hayes to deploy the magnetic arms of the submersible. Metal claws extended, reaching for the mirror's edge. The moment they touched, the entire cavern trembled. Dust rained from the ceiling. A low groan reverberated through the stone as though the ruins themselves had awakened. On the mirror's surface, the torchlit corridor flared with sudden fire. Figures emerged in the vision, hooded, faceless, gathering in rows. They bowed as one, chanting words no human tongue had spoken in millennia. Evelyn clutched Marcus's arm. "Stop! You don't understand what you're invoking." But Marcus only leaned closer, entranced. The claws locked onto the mirror's rim, and with a shudder it tore free from the silt. The cavern roared like a wounded beast. Ryan screamed as the sonar flared with movement, hundreds of shapes rising from the depths, circling, closing in. Hayes barked, "We've stirred the whole abyss." Outside the viewport, shadows swam closer, too fast, too many. Some looked like sharks, others like serpents, but their bodies flickered, distorted, as if they were made of reflections themselves. Evelyn sobbed. Their guardians. The legends said it was protected. Marcus barely heard her. His gaze was locked on the mirror, which now reflected not the cavern, not their submersible, but their own vessel on the surface, the Acheron, engulfed in flames. He whispered, half to himself, half to something listening beyond. The future. It's already begun. The cavern shook again, harder this time. Cracks split the walls. Debris rained down. Hayes yanked the controls, struggling to maneuver the submersible away, but the mirror pulled against the arms with impossible force, as if it refused to be removed. Marcus braced himself against the console, his eyes alight with feverish determination. "Don't let go. We've come too far." Evelyn's scream tore through the intercom. "If we take it, it'll kill us all." And yet, as the submersible lurched and alarms blared, Marcus couldn't bring himself to release it. For in that cursed reflection, he no longer saw only the future. He saw inevitability. The submersible strained against the pull of the mirror, metal arms groaning as if clutched by something alive. The cavern's collapse thundered around them, silt rising in suffocating clouds that blinded the floodlights. Ryan's panicked voice cracked through the intercom. "They're everywhere. Look." Shapes swarmed in the black water, circling closer with predatory precision. Some were serpentine, their bodies longer than the submersible itself, eyes glowing faintly like twin lanterns in the dark. Others looked like twisted echoes of sharks, their jaws splitting wider than nature allowed, lined with teeth that shimmered like glass. The strangest of all were the humanoid figures that seemed to flicker between solid and liquid, their faces warped into mirrors of the crew themselves. Evelyn gasped. "They're not just guardians. They're reflections, echoes of us, twisted by the mirror." As she spoke, one of the distorted humanoids pressed itself against the viewport. Its face shifted until Marcus saw his own eyes staring back at him, hollow and endless, before its hand of liquid glass slammed against the glass with a crack that reverberated through the hull. Hayes cursed, jerking the controls to swing the submersible away. The propellers roared, but the creatures swarmed faster, drawn to the relic like moths to flame. Marcus clung to the console, his voice fierce despite the rising terror. "Hold steady. We can fight them off long enough to bring the mirror up." Evelyn spun on him, her voice raw. "Fight them. Marcus, they're not of this world. This isn't survival, it's suicide." Ryan's breathing grew ragged. "They re-closing in. We not going to make it." His words broke into a scream as one of the serpents slammed its body against the hull, sending the submersible spinning. Sparks flew across the control panel. Warning sirens shrieked. Hayes growled, muscles straining as he fought to right the vessel. "If we don't drop that thing, we're dead in minutes." But Marcus refused. His gaze locked on the mirror, which now rippled violently, showing visions that shifted faster than thought. Empires rising, cities burning, oceans swallowing coasts, himself standing triumphant on ruins. He could not look away. "This is bigger than us," he muttered, voice trembling with devotion. "It's destiny. Don't you see? The mirror shows what will be. We only need to claim it." Evelyn slapped his shoulder, desperate to break his trance. "Marcus, look at me. It doesn't show the future, it shows the trap. That's why every story ends in disaster. The mirror consumes those who believe it." Outside, the humanoid reflections swarmed. One pressed its shifting face against the glass beside Ryan, its features twisting until it became him. Same eyes, same mouth, but with water pouring endlessly from its lips. Ryan recoiled, screaming, "It's me! It's drowning me!" The mirrored figure lunged, its body phasing halfway through the viewport before snapping back, leaving a spiderweb of cracks etched across the glass. The crew froze in horror. Evelyn whispered, "The hull won't last." Hayes made a brutal decision. He slammed a lever, releasing one of the magnetic arms. The mirror jerked violently, half freed, the pull on the submersible lessening. Marcus roared, fury overtaking reason. "What have you done?" Hayes snarled back, his voice raw. "Saved our skins, you fool. That thing will drag us all to hell." But before he could release the second arm, the humanoid reflections struck in unison. They battered the submersible like a swarm of living waves, their mirrored bodies hard as steel. One serpent coiled around the vessel, squeezing, metal shrieking as pressure gauges spiked. The lights flickered, then died, plunging them into near darkness. Only the mirror glowed, casting the cabin in an eerie bronze light. In that glow, Marcus saw visions of the crew. Evelyn's body lying cold and still, Hayes crushed beneath twisted steel, Ryan's lungs filling with seawater as he clawed for air. Yet he also saw himself walking free on a shore, the mirror under his arm, the world bending at his will. The visions overlapped, bleeding into one another until reality itself seemed fragile. Evelyn's voice broke through, desperate. "Marcus, if you don't let it go, none of us will ever see the surface again. Please." For the first time, his resolve faltered. He looked at her, saw the fear in her eyes, and something human stirred beneath the obsession. But then the mirror flared again, brighter than ever, showing him a vision of Evelyn kneeling beside him, reverent, acknowledging him as the one who had brought the future to heal. His doubt vanished. "No," he whispered, "I won't let it go. Not when we're this close." Hayes cursed and reached for the emergency release, but Marcus lunged, grappling with him in the cramped cabin. The submersible lurched, alarms wailing, as the Guardian slammed against the hull again and again. Cracks spidered wider across the viewport. Ryan screamed incoherently, clutching his helmet as though he could shut out the madness. Evelyn tried to pull Marcus away from Hayes, but the chaos was too great. The mirror's glow consumed the cabin, its visions filling every corner, every shadow. The Guardians outside moved in a frenzy, as though feeding off the struggle within. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, one of the viewport panels fractured. A thin stream of seawater hissed through, spraying across the console. The crew froze. Time seemed to hold its breath. Hayes growled, voice low and final. "We drop it. Now." But Marcus only stared at the mirror, drenched in seawater and bronze light, his face caught between awe and madness. "No," he whispered almost lovingly, "the future is mine." And outside, the Guardians of the Abyss pressed closer, their mirrored faces grinning as if they already knew the end. Water hissed through the fractured viewport, spraying in cold bursts as the submersible groaned under the crushing weight of the sea. The alarms screamed like dying sirens, every light flashing red, but still Marcus clung to the mirror, his fingers curled around its bronze edge as though it were the only thing keeping him alive. Evelyn shouted over the chaos, her voice raw with desperation. "Marcus, it's going to kill us all. Let it go." But he couldn't hear her, not truly. The mirror pulsed with light that consumed his vision, showing him endless futures. Him standing in the ruins of empires, him crowned in victory, him worshipped by masses who trembled at his power. He no longer saw the flooding cabin, the crew's terror, or the abyss pressing in. He saw only destiny. Hayes slammed his hands against the controls, wrestling to keep the submersible stable, but the serpentine Guardian coiled tighter, metal shrieking as the hull buckled. Ryan sobbed incoherently, his helmet fogging with panicked breaths as he tried to patch the viewport with trembling hands, but the stream of water only grew. "We're not going to make it," he choked. "We're dead. We're already dead." Evelyn crawled across the slippery floor toward Marcus, her eyes fierce despite the rising water. She grabbed his arm, shaking him. "If you ever cared about anything beyond yourself, care about us now. Let it go before it takes us all." For an instant, Marcus's gaze wavered. Her face broke through the flood of visions, her voice cutting into the fever of his obsession. He almost saw reason. Almost. But then the mirror shimmered again, and he saw Evelyn. Not pleading, not desperate, but kneeling at his side, eyes filled with reverence. In that instant, he chose the illusion over reality. He shoved her away. Evelyn fell back hard against the console, the breath knocked from her lungs. Hayes roared, his patience finally broken. "Then you'll die with it." He lunged forward, seizing the emergency release lever. Marcus grappled with him, their struggle violent, desperate, their shouts drowned by the groaning of the submersible tearing apart around them. The mirror throbbed brighter, its vision spilling into the cabin until every surface shimmered with fractured futures. Ryan screamed as he saw himself drowning in every reflection, 1,000 deaths in 1,000 possible tomorrows. He clawed at his own helmet as if to tear the visions away. Outside, the Guardians pressed closer, their mirrored faces grinning with inhuman hunger. One of them phased halfway through the hull, its liquid arm dripping onto the floor like molten glass before snapping back into the water. Evelyn forced herself up, her body aching, and saw Marcus and Hayes locked in a deadly struggle, the lever between them. She knew in that moment there was only one way out. Summoning every ounce of strength, she hurled herself into the fight. Her hand slammed the lever down, the magnetic arm released. The mirror lurched free. For a heartbeat, everything froze. The Guardians shrieked in unison, a soundless scream that rattled through the water, through bone, through soul. The mirror drifted weightless, glowing brighter than the sun in the abyss. Then it shattered. The explosion was not sound, but light. Bronze shards spun outward like meteors, vanishing into the black sea. The visions ripped apart, collapsing into darkness, leaving only the crushing reality of the deep. The Guardians dissolved like smoke in the current, their forms breaking apart into ripples that vanished as though they had never been. The submersible rocked violently, but the pull eased. Silence, heavy and absolute, returned. Marcus collapsed against the console, his face hollow with disbelief. "No. No. You destroyed it. You destroyed everything." Evelyn, chest heaving, glared at him through tears. "I saved us." But the price was not yet paid. The hull groaned again, water pouring in faster through the cracked viewport. Hayes cursed, slamming at the controls. "We've got minutes, maybe less." Ryan whimpered, curling into himself as the water rose around his waist. "We're not going to make it out." Marcus sat in the glow of failing lights staring at his empty hands. His obsession had slipped through his fingers, leaving nothing but despair. Evelyn crawled to him, her voice softer now. "Marcus, look at me. We're still alive. We can make it out if we work together." For a moment, something human returned to his eyes. But it was too late. The submersible shuddered as the pressure finally won. The viewport cracked fully, exploding inward. A torrent of freezing seawater roared into the cabin, knocking them off their feet. Evelyn fought to hold her breath, clinging to a railing as the flood consumed them. Hayes struggled with the emergency ascent controls, forcing the submersible's ballast to release. The vessel lurched upward, groaning, rocketing toward the surface like a wounded beast. The world narrowed to chaos. Water, darkness, choking silence. Evelyn's lungs screamed. She thought of the mirror, of the futures it had promised, of the trap it had always been. And then everything went black. When she awoke, it was to the slap of waves and the taste of salt in her mouth. She coughed violently, rolling onto her back, blinking against the harsh daylight. The wreck of the submersible floated nearby, torn open like a tin can. Debris bobbed on the waves. Hayes surfaced a few yards away, gasping, his face pale but alive. Ryan clung to a piece of wreckage, coughing up seawater, eyes wide with shock. Evelyn searched frantically. There was no sign of Marcus. She knew, even before the truth sank in, that he had chosen to stay with the future he thought was his. The sea had claimed him, as it had claimed the mirror. She lay back on the waves, tears mixing with the salt, her body trembling with exhaustion. The abyss had given them back to the world, but at a cost that would haunt them forever. Evelyn closed her eyes and whispered a vow. "No one will ever find it again. The world isn't meant to see what waits below. Far beneath them, in the silence of the ruined temple, The last shard of the mirror drifted into the silt, its surface faintly glowing. For an instant it reflected a vision of the surface. 3 survivors adrift, the sun burning bright. Then the shard dimmed, swallowed by the darkness, waiting for another hand foolish enough to lift it. The ocean was calm, deceptively calm, as the 3 survivors drifted on wreckage beneath the blazing sun. Days blurred together, waves rocking them endlessly, salt burning their lips and eyelids until the world became a haze of pain and exhaustion. Evelyn clutched a half-broken oxygen tank for buoyancy, her eyes scanning the horizon with stubborn hope. Hayes floated nearby on the remains of a hatch, his face lined with determination even through the agony of cracked ribs. Ryan clung silently to a wooden panel, too drained to speak, his youthful bravado long since stripped away. They had escaped the abyss, but the abyss lingered in them. At night, Evelyn would wake to visions, shards of glass floating in the dark, reflecting faces she did not want to see. She told herself they were nightmares, remnants of trauma, but deep down she knew better. Something of the mirror still clung to her. On the 4th dawn, a distant freighter appeared on the horizon. They were rescued, pulled from the sea half dead, their story dismissed as delusion, oxygen deprivation, hallucination. No one believed in ancient temples or cursed mirrors. To the world, they were survivors of a shipwreck, nothing more. But Evelyn carried the truth like a weight she could not set down. Weeks later, when she stood again on dry land, she returned to her quiet study lined with books and relics. She tried to bury herself in research, in rationality, but the sea would not release her. She saw it in every reflection: the surface of a cup of tea, a polished window, even the dark gloss of her own eyes. The shards of the mirror still whispered. She knew that Marcus had not died with nothing. Some piece of the relic remained below, waiting. She dreamed of it, calling to her from the silt, glowing faintly in the endless dark. In those dreams, she sometimes saw Marcus, whole and unbroken, his hand reaching toward her with a smile that was not his. Each time she awoke gasping, heart pounding, she swore she would never return. But the ocean has patience, more patience than any mortal. Hayes retreated from the sea entirely, settling inland, far from the water, where no wave could reach him. Ryan, haunted and hollow, drank himself into silence. Evelyn remained the last guardian of the truth, yet she knew truth had a way of resurfacing. One stormy evening, as she closed her study, she found something waiting on her desk. A small package, dripping wet, though no rain had touched her house. Inside was a shard of bronze, sharp as a razor, its surface faintly glowing. In it she saw herself, not as she was, but as she could be, years older, standing on the deck of another ship, the abyss opening once more beneath her. The shard pulsed, and she dropped it in horror, but the vision burned into her mind. The mirror was not destroyed. It was scattered, and each fragment carried its curse. Evelyn whispered into the empty room, voice trembling with both dread and defiance. "Then I'll make sure no one ever gathers the pieces." But deep down, even she did not know if she could resist forever, because the future has a way of pulling us toward it, whether we want it or not. Somewhere far below, in the silence of the deep, the temple waited, its ruins restless. The guardians, though scattered, stirred faintly in the current, as if aware the story was not finished. And in the shadows, something unseen smiled. The oracle's mirror was broken, but its prophecy remained unfulfilled. The sea keeps its secrets, and sooner or later, someone always comes looking. If this story of cursed relics, ancient prophecies, and the abyss itself pulled you into the deep, make sure you like this video, subscribe to Terra Uncharted, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the next dive into the mysteries of the ocean. The sea holds countless secrets. What we uncovered tonight was only the beginning.